Welcome to Brazil Bound, presented by Castrol GTX High Mileage, with the coach Jesse Marsh and Simon Borg. I'm Jason Seguini, and we are previewing USA and Belgium. This game, 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. Guys, it's been a great tournament so far. The U.S. has done very well for themselves. Let me ask you this. Is this game basically just icing on the cake after escaping the group of death?
Well, I look at it in two ways. So, first of all, I wasn't here in 2010, so I didn't see how the American community was galvanized by our performance. But when I look at 2006 to today, I can't believe culturally how far the sport has come and how much that we've accepted the World Cup as part of the fragment of our society. So, from that perspective, I think that, yeah, this has been a very successful World Cup. But from a team perspective, and if I were on the inside, I would just be whetting my appetite, and I would just be getting excited for all of the possibilities of what this could mean. And I would look at this Belgium game as a very important match, one where we could really prove ourselves and now elevate ourselves in the international community.
Now, the way I look at it, I think from a soccer standpoint, you checked off all the boxes. Making it out of the group of death when few people thought you could. I think the international soccer community thinks you've met your goal, and I think internally from a soccer standard, I think soccer people know, yes, you've met your goal. Now the issue is, I think the outside, I think the U.S., there's so much excitement of that excitement you're talking about that I think there are unrealistic expectations. You hear the President of the United States, President Obama, saying, we're still in a chance to make the final. No, the U.S. is not supposed to make the final. I'm going to go back on Jurgen Klinsmann term there. You're not supposed to make the final, but I think the outside, the non-soccer people don't get that.
Well, they think there's a chance, and in reality, there is a chance. Let me ask you this. If the U.S. were to play this game against Belgium and play it ugly and win versus play it pretty and look great but lose, does that matter? I mean, we're so far in the bubble, but you know there's a lot of people outside of that bubble, like you were talking about, Simon, who maybe have different expectations and they see it differently. What are your thoughts on how the U.S. plays versus the result?
I believe no one cares about how you play. I mean, Jesse, you were part of that U.S.-Ghana game. I think all people remember is, yeah, we lost against Ghana. So I think few remember the details of how well the U.S. may have played in that game. It's about the result.
What do you mean may have played?
I don't even remember.
We played well in that game. But I totally agree. There are no moral victories right now, okay? Right. It's all about results. And if we can play ugly and get to the next round and then play ugly again and get to the round after that, nobody's going to remember how we played. They're going to remember the results. So, yeah, I mean, the primary focus right now has to be, let's get past Belgium.
U.S. played ugly against Ghana, and that doesn't bother anyone.
Certainly. Well, look, we thought that there may be weather that could help the U.S. to maybe have a little extra advantage over this Netherlands team. When you look at the European teams, maybe they don't fare as well when the weather's really hot and humid. They're not going to get that in Salvador. They're going to get fairly moderate temperatures at 73. So is that, I guess, a disadvantage to the U.S. team to not have that in their favor? Or because the U.S. is probably tired too, is that a good thing?
Well, listen, the reality is that the hotter the game, the better it will be for the U.S. because I think we've had enough rest, and I think that our players are more used to that type of climate. And it started out that it was going to be 63 degrees, then 69. Now it's going to be 73.
Maybe it can get to 82.
Yeah, and it's going to be a night game, which means that the temperature will drop and everything else. So I expect this to be a fast-paced game. I expect the U.S. physically now to now be able to have enough energy to put a lot into it. And most importantly, from a U.S. side, I think that mentally they'll have enough time to recover and prepare themselves in the way for a real battle, a real fight, the American kind of contest that takes it down to the very end of the match.
But even if it's cool, in my opinion, I agree with you. I think the U.S. will be even more up for that battle, will give more energy to the game. And I don't think Belgium want to have anything to do with a slugfest here. They want to get their goal, maybe sit back, have a nice technical game, have an easy afternoon out, and I think the U.S. want to make sure that's not the case.
I think it depends on the part of the field. Like in the back, they're very well equipped to play a physical, hard game. But in the midfield, that's where it might make a difference.
Right.
That's where some of our physicality might make enough of a difference to help us gain an edge.
All right, we'll get to the lineups and our expectations for both teams' lineups in a little bit. I do want to ask you, Jesse, you've been through a tournament like this before in 2010. Tell me how training works when you get to this point. You know, you have guys who are clearly tired from traveling a bunch, playing tough games.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that now as you try to prepare them for the next rounds and not tire them out too much, but at the same time keep them fresh?
Well, first of all, I think there's two categories of players, okay? So let's start with category A, which are most of the players that have put in major minutes in this tournament. When you come out of the last game against Germany, you're already starting the conversations with the players on how do they feel, how do they manage that game, do they get banged up? Then along with that on a day-to-day basis, you're also checking in with your medical staff and your physios and seeing what their input is to where different guys stand and where the team is at as a whole. Then you're also putting training together so that it's not too physically demanding for the players that have been starting, but it's training that's fast and sharp and still keeping them going in all the ways they're going to need come the next game. And you're really using that as an evaluation tool to see now, along with what the players have told you and the physios have told you, what players actually look like during training. And so then you're using that to, along with what your tactical approach is for the next game, to evaluate what your decisions will be. Then in Group B, you're still trying to supplement training for them. So maybe you tell the starters to step off the field and go get in the ice tub, and now you're preparing training maybe for an extra 15, 20, half hour to push them a little bit more so that they're prepared if they get called upon. And I will give the staff a lot of credit because one of the guys that had to step on and play was Omar Gonzalez, and he hadn't put in major minutes in the last month, and he looked prepared and ready to go. So they deserve a lot of credit in that area.
But Jesse, is a coaching staff preparing the team or preparing some players physically for a possible quarterfinal? Or are you just thinking about the Belgium game?
Well, the players who you don't think will be able to play in the Belgian game, such as Jozy, maybe you're now putting a different regimen together for him. But for the most part right now, the 100% focus is on what it's going to take to get through this Belgium game.
All right, we're going to take a look at our thoughts on Jozy Altidore. He's back in training with the team, but now we want to get to looking at the lineup that we expect the U.S. to implement in this game. How is Jurgen Klinsmann going to try to defeat Belgium? Who is he going to put out there to do this? Guys, take it over to the tactics board and let us know your thoughts on how the U.S. will line up.
All right, first, Simon, be careful, okay? Don't break this thing. I know
My
it's
hands
your
are
first
clean.
time.
My hands are
okay,
clean.
Good. All right, so last game they played a version of a 4-1-4-1, and they played Davis in. I think that potentially Bedoya could come into that spot this game. And you could start the conversation by saying that the players in the outside midfield spots haven't provided a lot in the attack, and therefore in some ways they're interchangeable. I think that maybe Bedoya, fresh legs coming in for this game might be the thing to do. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But if they choose to not do this, I think one other possibility is still to play Wondolowski up top with Dempsey, potentially tilt Jones a little bit to the left, Bradley a little bit deeper, and with the emphasis at that point being that you hope that Wondolowski can help you have one more player ahead of the field to now move your team up the field and hold possession a little bit.
My concern, Jesse, is that we talked about how the U.S. has to make it difficult for Belgium in midfield, and I worry about this. Jermaine Jones, I think he likes to come inside. I don't think he's as disciplined to stay out wide. And Belgium's wingers, they love to hug the line.
Yes.
And I don't trust that he'll come back and help enough. He's more of a central player. So I think you have to go with Alejandro Bedoya. I think you're almost forced into that 5 midfield setup. I would like to, you have Wondolowski here. I would like to see Diskerud. I think if the U.S. are down in this game, and you're not getting any attack going, I think you have to have Diskerud, bring him in. If Michael Bradley's not having a good day as the attacking midfielder, I think you bring Diskerud in. Hopefully he can connect guys and connect passes and have Michael Bradley and operate with Beckerman a little deeper.
Yeah, I mean, and if I were to go back and now really talk about what has made the U.S. effective, okay, is that we have forced the team, every team we've played against, we've forced them to now play in the wide areas of the field.
Yeah.
And I think that the guys who deserve credit for that are these three guys. So the work, now we've seen that the stats have come out that Bradley's covered the most ground, but the work that these three have done in the center of the midfield to close down passing lanes, to make it hard in that part of the field, to keep it tight, to win their little battles, has meant that we forced a lot of things to go wide, and that plays into the strengths of who these guys are. So we saw Omar have such a good game last game. Beasler's cut out a lot of plays on crosses. So for me, I still think that this triumvirate of players in the middle of the field defensively means so much to what our team has done.
My worry about using those same tactics against Belgium is that when you're forcing the ball wide, you're getting the ball into the feet of Belgium's best playmakers. And that means more touches for Eden Hazard on the left, more touches for Mertens here on the right. And I think as opposed to a team like maybe Portugal, that's more dangerous.
I mean, look, guys, when you were dealing with Portugal, when you got it out wide, Cristiano Ronaldo was standing out of there a lot of the time. So
He's pretty good.
It's kind of pick your poison when it comes to that. But interestingly, you have Omar Gonzalez in there. My thought is when you're dealing with these tough guys like De Bruyne and Eden Hazard, who are more of the combine and get by you through combination play guys, you might want a quicker center back, which to me would be Cameron. When you're dealing with a guy like Lukaku, who is probably one of the top forwards but not obviously playing that well in the World Cup so far, you want a guy like Omar Gonzalez. How do you choose between Cameron and Gonzalez when you're picking the lineups here? You guys have Gonzalez. What makes you take him over Cameron?
I agree with your logic, Jason, but for me going into this game, the bigger logic is how does it fit within your team? And because Omar comes off of such a good performance, I would be pretty surprised if they made a decision to go back with Cameron. Although I do agree that in some ways Cameron's skill set might fit this game better, but I just don't agree with the rationale of taking Gonzalez out after playing such a good match.
I agree with you. I think Gonzalez made a lot of great plays in the last game against Germany in the box, in pressure situations where I think now you ride that. He has confidence. He's making good plays. And if you trust that your midfield is in fact going to send play wide, let Gonzalez be in there to make plays in the box. You're hoping it's not going to be combinations to the team playing through you. And there, Gonzalez has had issues tracking runners. But if it's not going to be that game, you have no worry about it.
And then the last point for me again is, I think possession is still is going to be an important stat in this game. And I don't always feel that way, but I think that the U.S. has to play more in their end. And as much as there's been so much talk about Bradley and his sharpness, I look, again, at these two positions. Yep. And these two players have to provide us with more cleverness, more sharpness, more ability to hold up a play, see a pass, deliver a pass, and whoever these two guys are, Davis, Bedoya, Jozy, we've talked about Yedlin. We need better games from those guys and more dynamic attacking plays for us to be more effective in the attack.
And if you do that, one of these have to stay back and cover that space that's vacated, clearly.
All right, guys, looking at the lineup there for the U.S. team, one of the guys that we only briefly brushed over was Jozy Altidore, and there was some hope and some talk that Altidore could return from this game after the hamstring injury he suffered 20 minutes into the opening game. But we've talked about this. None of us are very confident that we're going to see Jozy Altidore in this game. And Jesse, my thought is, when you have a guy who is an injury risk, who has a hamstring that could very easily be retweaked, my thought is if you want to play him, you have to start him. Because if you sub him in late in the game and he re-injures it, then now you're using two subs on the same player at the same position, which is basically a disaster happening. Give me your thoughts as a coach. How do you think about that? And do you think there is any option to get Jozy Altidore into this game?
First of all, I don't think Jozy will be ready. It's just the type of injury and the way he injured it where I don't see that 2 weeks is enough recovery time. But your logic makes sense other than this fact. When you have that type of muscle injury, it's very unlikely that you can last 45 minutes because fatigue starts to set in, and it makes it very unlikely that you can get through more time than that without re-injuring it. So if you're going to put him on the field, you're thinking more that maybe he can last in the 20 to 30 minute range, maybe even 15 to 20 minute range. And so for that reason, yeah, you're taking a little bit of a risk by using him as a sub, and you can't use your third sub because if he does go down, then you don't have anywhere else to go. But if you're going to use him in your first or second sub and think 15 or 20 minutes, that for me is now still where this thing is going to go.
So let me throw a wrinkle in there for you. So you say he's a 15-minute, 20-minute player. You throw him in at the end. You're chasing a goal. You're down 1-0. You throw him in the last 15 minutes. Are you thinking, wait a minute, if I throw him in and I tie the game, then we have a half an hour to play. I'm not using him. Does that kind of rule him out?
Yes, it does in certain ways, and we'll get into more of the extra time logic later on, but yeah, that's another factor that you have to consider, and you know that this thing could go to extra time.
All right, as far as we're concerned, we don't see Jozy Altidore getting into the game, and that is why these teams have played each other before. They played in Cleveland last year. Belgium won the game 4-2. I'm not sure the game on the field was actually as close as the score line was. Belgium really played this U.S. team off the field. It wasn't, I would say it wasn't 100% a team for either team on the field. But the question I have is, that game that they played, how much does it play into this game? How familiar does it make a team with another team? And is there an advantage either way for either Belgium or the U.S. in this case, Simon?
I think the advantage is all for the Americans. And the reason is this. Belgium, after a 4-2 win, and as easy as it came, I think they are risking being overconfident coming into this game. We handled them easy. It was a lot of the same starters we're going to see in this game. And also, for the U.S., the reason it's an advantage, I think, Jesse, is because now they have a feel for the kind of passing rhythm Belgium can get into. And I think now they're that much more aware of, yeah, we can't let them start getting in that groove. We can't let certain players be on the ball. And to have the experience to face the guys like Morales or Hazard in that game, I think helps a lot.
Yeah, there are some benefits to playing that match for the U.S. in terms of understanding some of their attacking qualities. But I really don't read too much into it, and I think it's a non-factor. It's a year ago. They're different lineups. It's, you know, there's so much more to this game, and so much more to it that I really don't think that that'll play much of a factor.
But while the U.S. have changed their system, Belgium hasn't changed that much from that team. I mean, when we look at it on the board later, we'll see. De Bruyne, these guys are still occupying the same spots.
And De Bruyne was very good against the U.S. team. Hazard, though, didn't play in the game. His brother was on the roster. He wasn't on the roster. That's the one guy who, for me, is the difference maker on this Belgium team, and he's who they're going through. The U.S. did not play against him. One of the guys who did play in this game, though, in Cleveland last year, in Belgium, of course, is Sacha Kljestan, the midfielder, plays in Belgium for Anderlecht, one of the top teams in the Belgian league. He's played with and against many of these guys. We caught up with him earlier today to ask him what his thoughts were going into this game.
You've played with some of these players. You've played against some of them when they were a little bit younger. You know, what would you say, and then also you played against them in Cleveland last summer. What would you say the strengths are of this team, and where would you say maybe that the U.S. can get at them a little bit?
Their biggest strength to me is their defense. I think between Vincent Kompany and Van Boyten and also Thibaut Courtois, the goalkeeper, they haven't given up very any chances during this World Cup. And on top of that, they have attackers that can really make a difference either in one-on-one situations or, you know, kind of guys that can make something out of nothing like Eden Hazard, for example. For me, maybe the most important player is Kevin De Bruyne, who's going to be like the attacking midfielder, the highest up of the three midfielders, and really the one who he can dribble out of pressure, but he also plays the passes that put Hazard into good position or maybe put Lukaku into good position. So overall, really strong. Maybe in the midfield we can outwork them a little bit and hopefully create some opportunities that way.
All right, Sacha, thanks a lot for joining us, and good luck to you throughout the rest of the season. All right. This Belgium team does have some injury concern. When you look at the injuries that they have going into the match, Vincent Kompany is the guy who stands out amongst all the others. That is a huge one. Thomas Vermeulen also a bit of a loss because if Company can't go, Vermeulen is the guy who would come in for him. So guys, now as you go over to the tactics board to take a look at the Belgium lineup and what our expectations were, how do these injury concerns on the defensive side for Belgium factor into this game?
Yeah, most of their starters are healthy. It's a lot of their reserves that are in question. The one major question is Vincent Kompany and whether he'll be healthy. Most likely, they will substitute him with Lambert. That's my French pronunciation, by the way.
Very good.
Phenomenal.
And there's a potential that they could slide Vertonghen in there too, but most likely Lambert, and then they keep things the same. I think Kompany will be ready. Simon thinks maybe he won't. It's certainly a question mark. But when you look at this team, what are they good at? Well, Lukaku up top in terms of runs, strong, fighting, being on the end of plays. These two players have a great combination of soccer, athleticism, ability to cover ground. So that will actually be a fantastic matchup for Bradley and Jones because they share a lot of the same qualities. And then you heard Sasha talk about this player, De Bruyne, and how he's able to now really be the idea man and the brains for how they attack and things that he sees and balls that he's able to play guys in order to put them in the attack. And then obviously, Hazard.
I think he is under a lot of pressure, Eden Hazard, and they're talking about it even in Belgium camp. They're waiting for the moment where Hazard actually takes over a game. And so if you can get in his head early and really never let him get going, I think there's a chance you can take him out of the game entirely. The area you have to worry about, to me, is the right side. And they've had an exceptional first half out of him, Mertens in one of their group games. I think they had Morales play well if he ends up going there. So I think that it's the other winger that I would be worried about if I'm the U.S. De Bruyne, I know people are high on him maybe in this setup, but as an individual player, I think the U.S. can handle him.
Guys, I mean, when I look at this team and I see Lukaku, I think he is a beast that the U.S. have not had to deal with at this point. Even when they played against Germany, who's a team that's big and physical and strong, they played the first half with Müller up top. Lukaku is a different type of forward. The issue is Belgium has not seemed to really get into a rhythm with their attacking players combining with him. Is this a sleeping giant who could be awakened in this game? Or is this something where the U.S. maybe has a little advantage because Belgium is sort of out of sorts in their attack?
Well, yeah, there are some question marks about where his mentality's been, his relationship with the manager. But it's always dangerous because you describe it as a sleeping giant. But you don't want to treat a quality player lightly because guys like Lukaku can break out like that and can score 3 goals on you just like that. So I think for the U.S. to have the proper mentality to make it hard on him from the start, physically, mentally, getting in his head, making sure he has no space, that is going to be a major important role for our 2 center backs to make sure that he doesn't get himself going in this tournament.
And let's remember, his replacement and the guy who's come in for Lukaku, Origi, has really had an impact on matches, scored a winning goal in the previous game as well. He's 19. The coach is saying, hey, let's take it easy on this kid. He's not going to start him. I would be shocked if he did, but he's going to be a factor. I would say he's even more dangerous than Lukaku because he's more fleet-footed and he has a little more trickery in him.
Yeah, scored a great goal.
All right, guys, I want to kind of take a look at how this game will break down tactically and get your thoughts at just how these teams match up when you put the players on the field. What do you see the U.S.'s options as far as attacking this Belgium team? We talked about how much quality they have in the attack. They have quality in the defense, even with the injuries that they have. How does the U.S. have to attack them?
Well, for me, you could draw a lot of comparisons between how the Belgian team plays and how the Germans played. And it's almost because their 4-back line are similar to Germany's in terms of their 4 kind of natural center backs. So that still then puts a question mark on how they can do in foot races. And I think that the way that we beat them in foot races and catch them in foot races is not by necessarily how we use Clint or Jozy or Bedoya, but how we can use Johnson. And so for me, that's why it's important for us to have possession up the field in these areas so that we can use Johnson and Beasley at times to join in from wide spaces, and then that will pull apart their back line and then hopefully make room for Dempsey to make little penetrating moves.
And you saw it a little bit with Portugal in the game where the U.S. frankly had their best performance on the field in terms of making the game. So I agree with you that, again, we talk about it a lot. Fabian Johnson has to be involved.
Yeah.
All right, guys, you can come over and join me at the desk. I want to talk to you a little bit. These games are elimination games. That means you go into overtime if they're tied, and you go into penalty kicks if they're tied after that. So how, Jesse, do you now plan for these kind of games in terms of managing your roster, managing the substitution pattern? You know, we talked a little bit about it with Jozy. What do you do as a coach when you're preparing for what could be a 120-minute game as opposed to a 90-minute game?
Yeah, well, that's the big thing is now when you're looking at your 3 bullets that you have in your holster, you're not just thinking about getting to 90 minutes, you're surveying the game, and at the 70th, 80th minute, you have to be thinking about what you need to do to potentially either now shut the game down if you're ahead, or if you're behind, to push the game to get to 90 minutes, and then from there. So you have to be a little bit more cautious in when and how you use your reserves, and the team also has to understand that the 11 starters may be on the field for a little bit longer, and that has to play into your game plan and your tactics. If I go back to 2010 when we played Ghana, and we picked up a goal in the later stage of the match to tie the game up. We had one more sub, and we saved it until now the start of extra time, and we put in Herculez Gomez, partly because we felt like in the extra time that he could help us and he could help push the game and maybe get us a goal, but also because he was one of our best penalty shooters, and we felt like he was the guy that we wanted to have on the field at the end of the game if it went to penalties.
How much of the substitutions that you're planning for are also a wait-and-see game to see, okay, let me see what the other coach is going to do. Let me see what his moves are so then I can counter. I mean, clearly, if your team is affected by something, you're gonna act. But how much are you waiting also to see what their move is?
Yeah, I think as a coaching staff, you're trying to plan out how the game might go based on who they are, based on what they use off the bench, based on who you are and what you like to use off the bench. But again, because you have your 23 subs all available, you're trying to maximize your game plan to play to your advantage and to strategically put the game on your terms. So there's a lot that goes into it. That's what makes being a manager fun. It's also what makes being a manager hard.
I'm sure that leads to plenty of gray hairs. Guys, before we get to your picks for this game, because I want to know your thoughts, and it's always fun to hear Simon's thoughts on how the U.S. are going to do in any game, I want to throw it down to Sao Paulo. Nick and Andrew have been down in Brazil this whole World Cup. I hope you've been following them here on MLSsoccer.com and on Brazil Bound. Nick was able to get out on the streets before the Mexico-Netherlands games to try to find out how the U.S. team is coming across to the locals down there and, of course, to the visitors who are there for the tournament. So let's hear from Nick on what the people down in Sao Paulo were thinking about the U.S. team ahead of their game.
Hey guys, you know, one of the best neighborhoods in Sao Paulo to watch a game is Via Madalena. We're on Rua Aspicuelta. That's the main street going through this neighborhood, and a lot of folks out to watch games today. We decided to ask around and see if anybody's rooting for the U.S. national team when they go up against Belgium. Here's what they thought.
You've seen a couple games. What do you think of the U.S. so far in the World Cup?
I think it's great. I think it's been a gritty performance. I think they've worked extremely hard, and through sometimes pure determination, they've been able to advance. I love their chances against Belgium.
What do you think of the U.S. so far in Brazil?
I think they've been defending very well.
I think they have a very good team. I mean, the U.S. is very focused all the way.
I think they are playing really well. They almost tie with Germany, and they will advance for the next round.
I don't know how much you've seen of the Americans, but what do you think of them so far in the World Cup?
I saw every game, but they played quite good. I like Jürgen Klinsmann, but I really don't think they have chances against Belgium. Sorry.
Do you think the U.S. will beat Belgium? You think they'll beat Belgium?
Yes, of course, of course.
I think they'll beat Belgium for sure.
Honestly, I didn't like how Belgium played.
I think, yes, the U.S. will beat Belgium. Yeah, I think they'll come away with the victory. I think they need to attack a little bit more, but now it's one and done, so they don't need to play conservatively. I think the defense has been strong, and they just need to find a way to link up top with Dempsey a little bit more and potentially maybe move Bradley back a little bit, secure some of the defense, and maybe bring another playmaker in, but I love their chances.
There you go. Talking tactics with Neil, who for now is wearing a Mexico jersey. He's going to put on the U.S. jersey, right?
Yeah, a couple days.
When they take on Belgium in Salvador.
We'll have to get Neil back in the studio to do some tactics at the tactics board with us. But
yeah,
guys,
he was good.
Yeah, when you look at this game, everybody there, you don't know if it's because they had a camera in their face and they knew who they were talking to, felt good about the U.S.'s chances. It's almost, there's almost this feeling amongst U.S. fans and U.S. media that like this can be done, and to me that's scary. I almost rather be the underdog and rather it be a far-fetched idea for the U.S. to win. But give me your take on how you think this game's going to play out and who you think is going to win.
Well, I do still think we're the underdog, but I expect us to be able to recover physically. I expect ourselves to be able to impose ourselves upon the game a little bit more. So I don't think we'll win the possession battle, but I think it'll get a little bit more toward 50-50. Because we'll be a little bit more in their end, I expect us to score at least one goal, and I'm predicting 2. But I also think Belgium's going to cause us a lot of trouble, and they're very good in the attack, and they're very aggressive all over the field. So I think it's going to make for a really exciting game. It's a really tough one to call, but I'm calling a draw 2-2 all the way into penalties, and then I got my coin here. Tails, U.S. wins in a penalty shootout.
All right, Simon.
Look, I know our producer is dying to bust out the rain cloud, and you could do it right now if you wanted to, really. Because what I'm going to say is I'm sticking by my claim that Belgium, this Belgian team, despite being the dark horse, despite being as talented as they are, mentally, as a unit, they're not all there, in my opinion. When the game gets difficult, I think they wilt. And people will say, wait a minute, they've come back in games. But I think they play individually. You saw in their last group game, guys just get the ball and take players on. That's essentially what they do. They don't operate as a unit, and I think the pressure of being in this spot and maybe the game being tighter than they imagined against the U.S., I think mentally the U.S. can take advantage of that. So I feel good about this game as well.
Oh,
and
no.
That's
bad news.
I think the U.S. will get their looks. They score 2 goals. They win this 2-1 against a Belgian team that doesn't meet expectations.
All right, welcome to our side.
This is not looking good for the U.S. I don't know. I feel terrible about this because I have the U.S. winning 2-1 also. So not only have I jinxed it with everybody picking the same team, but I've also agreed with Simon, which is doubly as painful. All right, I'm going to end it there and hope that we didn't jinx them. Hopefully Greg, who couldn't join us today, picked Belgium, so at least somebody goes the other route. I want to remind everyone, though, that we are going to do a live post-game show after the match. So no matter what happens, we will be here for you to call in. You can call in at 212-481-1951. We'll take your calls. We'll take your tweets. You can tweet at MLS. Use the hashtag BrazilBound with anything you want to get on the show. Of course, we'll be giving away Castrol World Cup swag. It's what we do here, and we enjoy it. Hopefully, we're all here talking about and celebrating a U.S. win as they move on to the quarterfinals. If not, we'll be here for moral support, hugging each other and trying to get through the painful loss. Thank you very much for joining us here on our preview to Belgium and the U.S. Again, that game 4 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN and Univision, July 1st. That is Tuesday. Thanks for joining us, guys, on Brazil Bound, presented by Castrol GTX High Mileage.